Part 155. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1551. Everyone looked forward to hearing the reputation. On the table not far away, there was a mobile phone. The mobile phone was in a call state, and the voice was playing outside. The person speaking inside was none other than Jean. Someone scolded, "Jean, let us go immediately." A low laugh came from the other side of the phone. "Everyone, be safe and don't be impatient. As I said, the murderer is among you. Now I just need everyone to cooperate with me and work together to find the murderer. The Stan family will never grace will be revenged." Among the trapped guests, an older man scolded, "What on earth do you want? Their deaths have nothing to do with me, let me go immediately." Some women also cursed unwillingly, "You don't have any evidence, why lock us up? Don't try to play tricks." The profit-seeking businessman tries to distance himself from the relationship, while the delicate-minded lady knows that she is alone and weak, so they stick together in words to gain more support. Jean asked, "See the knife on your right?" Everyone picked up the daggers beside them one after another and looked at each other. At this time, I heard Jean say on the phone again, "I specially left a right hand for you. If anyone is sitting next to the murderer, please use this knife in your hand to kill the other party. As long as the murderer is dead, I will immediately let you go." The faces of many people present immediately turned pale. The dagger in his hand seemed to have turned into a hot potato, neither holding it nor putting it down. "I dare not stab others rashly, and I am afraid of being stabbed by others. It's crazy." The middle-aged woman murmured pale, and then screamed unbearably, "You crazy? Do you want to provoke us to kill each other? How could we know who the murderer is?" Another person said, "Everyone, don't listen to Jean. It's dawn now, and it won't be long before we land. He can't lock us up forever. Our bodyguards are outside. They may rescue us at any time." These words were echoed by everyone. "Yeah, the people from under the rose won't just sit idly by. They must be thinking of a way outside. Brother Stan's subordinates let this bastard, Jean, mess around. Don't they all have brains? What brains do they have? The master is dead, and they are probably worried about going back and being punished, so they jump off the wall in a hurry." Everyone cursed in unison, condemning Jean and the subordinates of the Stan family together. It seemed that this could calm down the flustered heart. Murong Cheng and Gu Liang discussed in a low voice. Tongwu and Wang Zhan brought people up, but they could only take the stairs. The other parties are all tall and condescending. Our people don't have much advantage. We are still alive, Brother Stan is dead, this is the biggest advantage. Gu Liang looked down at his watch. Besides, they must be tired after guarding outside all night, and they won't last long. Murong Cheng was thoughtful when he heard the words, "In this case, didn't Jean make a foolish move? He is so good at calculating, how could he not have expected this result? Is it because of Tang Tang?" Muzi continued, "He's afraid of Tang Tang. Even if he has a good plan, it's not convenient to implement it, otherwise he wouldn't be hiding now." She turned to look at Tang Tang. "Is there a way to find out where Jean is now?" Tang Tang acted as if she hadn't heard of it, and stared straight at the woman diagonally opposite, with undisguised anger leaping in her eyes. "What kind of medicine did you put in the water?" Tang Tang stared at her viciously. "I saved your child. You actually repay your kindness with revenge." The woman looked ashamed and lowered her head deeply. When the others heard Tang Tang's words, they all fell silent, and looked at the young couple in surprise or suspicion, their faces showing guard. Some people who did not understand the language asked in a low voice what was going on, and when they learned that the couple had tampered with the water they drank, they all condemned, "It's too insidious. I guess someone won't touch the water on the table, and I made a special arrangement for it this hand." The woman cried loudly, "I can't help it either. My child is in his hands. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1552. As soon as the woman cried, everyone felt a little resentful, and it was hard to scold them any more. Even if he despises her behavior, he only throws a contemptuous look, which can be regarded as barely accepting the reason why she is forced to be helpless. Just accept, not understand. The living room fell silent, and everyone waited for rescue in silence. Only the woman's suppressed sobbing sounded from time to time. Tang Tang was still furious, and stared at the other party fiercely. When she thought that it was rare for her to do good deeds, but instead was bullied by others, her heart was burning with anger. At this time, Jean's voice came from the mobile phone on the table again. What's the matter? Has everyone discussed who the murderer is? Jean. Don't waste your time. We won't fall for your tricks, someone replied. Jean smiled lightly. Delaying time is not a good idea. In fact, what's so difficult about it? As long as you hand over a murderer, you will be saved, and I will have an answer. Everyone, don't think that if you keep procrastinating, you will be able to put aside the relationship. Brother Stan died on this ship. If the murderer doesn't show up for a day, you will always be suspects. Every word he said was provocative and provocative. Turn over one person, and everyone will be safe, and most importantly, there will be an answer to the Stan family. No one spoke. Everyone was silent. Even if they had hesitated in their hearts, they didn't want to be the first bird. There was a faint sound of fighting outside the door, and everyone's expressions changed. It's rescue. It's already very close, otherwise you won't hear the sound. Jean, who was hiding alone, seemed to be unaware of the situation outside, and continued, It's boring to wait so dryly. Why don't we have some shows to cheer us up? Then came the sound of sliding curtains from the direction of the balcony. The floor-to-ceiling curtains are equipped with electronic tracks, which can be controlled remotely. At this moment, they are slowly opened, just like a curtain is drawn, revealing the scene of the stage. I saw a rectangular sand table on the balcony, and two infant babies were lying side by side under the sand table. While others were still wondering, the parents of the twins had already realized that it was their own child, and the woman's crying instantly got out of control. Struggling desperately, but unable to make it through because of being handcuffed on the wrist. Mu Zi's face was already pale at this moment, and her voice even started to tremble. Look below, the book on the sweeping robot. One end of the glass sand table is placed on a low stool, and at the other end, a thick book is erected on the floor sweeping robot, which delicately maintains the balance. Once the vacuum robot starts working, the book will fall, and once the book falls, the sand table will lose its balance and collapse towards the baby. Judging from the distance, it will not hit the child, but the sand will inevitably pour. The whole nest of man-eating ants will crawl out. Parents of twins are almost insane. The man desperately smashed the metal chain connecting the handcuffs with a dagger, and the woman cried out in agony. Jean on the other end of the phone didn't speak anymore, but let out a faint chuckle of enjoyment. The indicator light of the sweeping robot lights up, starts the cleaning program, and starts to move. Don't. The woman was forced to collapse, crying and picking up the dagger. I know who the murderer is. I know. She held up the dagger. No matter who was beside her, she stabbed randomly. The other party was a middle-aged man. Seeing that she was in a bad mood, he had long been wary. Now when he saw her raising his knife, he would stab her, so he dodged immediately. After all, his left hand was restrained. Even if he tried his best to avoid it, his arm was scratched by the blade. He cursed, and when he saw the woman stabbing him again, he lifted his foot and kicked it. Boom! That kick was so hard that the dagger drew an arc in the air and landed in the distance, making a metallic sound. At the same time, the books placed on the sweeping robot fell, the sand table tilted to the ground, the glass shattered, and the man-eating ants in the ant nest gushed out like a black tide. Ah, again, I was slapped in the face by myself, it hurts. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1553. Mothers can always do unexpected things for their children. The dagger was kicked away, but she hugged the opponent's feet tightly. No matter how much the opponent kicked, she refused to let go. The middle-aged man kicked twice but didn't push it away. He was so annoyed that he stabbed the woman's arm almost without thinking. Blood dripping. She still didn't let go, crying, "I've caught the murderer. I've caught the murderer. Save my child." The middle-aged man wanted to stab again, and the woman's husband also collapsed, shouting with red eyes, "Stop! I'm a murderer. Do I turn myself in? Come at me for everything." The scene was chaotic, and the man-eating ants that came out of the nest had already spread along the sand, getting closer and closer to the baby. Tang Tang pulled her left hand hard, and there were red marks on her wrist. The metal chain was thick and strong, and it was fixed on the floor without moving. She watched those ants climb up the swaddling clothes that wrapped the baby. Their lips were white, and they hacked the handcuffs even harder. And used the tip of the knife to pry the nails fixed on the floor tiles. But it's useless. It's all useless. The nails are nailed tight. The wrists are tightly locked. Can't break free. When the baby uttered its first sharp cry, Tang Tang cried too, sobbing with tears, "What to do, what to do, what to do?" She can control ghosts, but she can't save people. She can take away the souls of living things, but she can't disperse mindless insects and ants. Not all the people present were hard-hearted. Some women had red eyes, and some men closed their eyes tightly. The child's parents cried to the point of death. Muzi I suddenly said to Murong Cheng, "Quick! Take off your clothes." Murong Cheng was taken aback for a moment, but he quickly realized that he immediately unbuttoned the button. It was inconvenient to take it off with one hand. Muzi I helped him pull and pull together, took off his clothes for a few seconds, and then slammed in the direction of the swaddling baby. The clothes are loose, and when thrown on the ground, they are like a fan, which can blow out a big gust of wind. This wind may not be useful to humans, but it can have a great impact on the little ants. Others were inspired to take off their clothes and get involved. However, they were too far away from the balcony. Even with all their strength, they only slowed down the speed of the man-eating ants. The sound of fighting outside the door was getting closer and more intense. I heard the door being slammed several times, but no one came in to save them. The baby's crying was piercing, and there were more and more black spots on the light blue swaddle, and the ants were getting denser and denser. For ordinary people, man-eating ants are not scary, but for babies who can't move, can't run, can't walk, and don't know how to wave their hands to knock out ants, they are a death-like threat. Tang Tang's tears were pattering down, as if the child was herself. The knife in his hand chopped the handcuffs unconsciously, cutting the flesh several times, all scarlet marks. Gu Liang couldn't bear to watch it any longer, so he raised his voice to stop her. "Tang Tang! Don't chop it up! Someone will come in soon." Tongwu and Wang Zhan's men are outside the door at the moment, but the other party has a lot of people and the door is locked. When will they be able to come in? Will the baby be able to wait until then? At the auction, such a thick cobra turned into a pile of bones in a few minutes. How long can a baby with delicate skin and tender flesh last? What's more, what if you bite your eye? How to get into the ear? It's too late. Tang Tang looked at the place with tears in her eyes. "No one wants me, so I can't survive. Their parents are all there, why can't I survive, why can't I survive? Looking down at his blood-red wrist, Tang Tang took a deep breath, and a stern look appeared in his eyes. Gu Liang vaguely sensed what she was going to do, and his eyes were full of horror. Tang Tang, he suddenly shouted angrily, reaching out to grab her shoulder. However, it was still a step too late. Tang Tang clenched the dagger tightly, and slashed at her wrist with all her strength. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1554. When this dagger chops the iron chain, it feels blunt and benzene. Now chopping flesh and bones, it is cutting gold and cutting jade, extremely sharp. Every time you cut, blood and flesh splatter. Tang Tang's face turned pale from the pain, his hands and feet trembled uncontrollably, he still gritted his teeth, and slashed fiercely. He pulled and pulled, trying to be quick, and didn't take that hand as his own at all. The people around were all froze in shock, and they all stared at her dumbfounded. Gu Liang's eyes were stained red by her blood, and he opened his mouth to call her, to stop her, to scold her and beat her. His throat seemed to be dead, and he couldn't make a sound. Tang, Tang. Her wrist was chopped to pieces by herself. Tear hard, the joints separate. A large stream of blood was like an out-of-control water column after a water pipe burst, spraying out several meters away. She also fell down, then got up, stumbled and ran to pick up a baby, put it on the table where the leftovers were piled up, and then picked up another. When she was doing these things, the entire living room was silent, and everyone watched her every move in a daze, forgetting to speak. There are layers of swaddling clothes, and they are full of ants. Tang Tang shook off the swaddling clothes, and the ants fell down like black debris. The twins were still crying, and the baby's body was dotted with blood spots from bites. Some ants bit the delicate eyelids, and the blood dripped down mixed with tears. It was so desolate. These man-eating ants are ferocious in nature, and once they bite their prey, they never let go. Tang Tang frantically patted the ants on the baby with one hand, but couldn't stop them from continuing to crawl on the baby. Tang Tang. Use water, Murong Cheng shouted hoarsely. There was leftover water on the table, Tang Tang picked it up and rinsed the two children. The ants immediately dispersed when they touched the water. The half jug of water was quickly used up, so she picked up the wine bottle and replaced the water with wine. She didn't know how long she had been washing it, and she didn't know if she had washed it clean. Her eyes turned black, and her consciousness became more and more lax. Excessive blood loss brings a series of reactions: pale face, hypoxic body, lower blood pressure. There seemed to be many people calling her by her ears. Can't hear clearly. Exhausted, the wine bottle fell from his hand and fell to the ground, hitting some ants. The scene of man-eating ants fleeing in fright is like black ripples rippling in circles. She fell powerlessly. At the last moment, I could vaguely see countless ants gathered on the edge of the pool of blood, greedily coveting her flesh and blood. Consciousness is always vague. The body is cold. The wound hurts. Can't keep my eyes open. In a daze, I heard a voice, there is a medical service center on board, and she must be transfused as soon as possible. She wanted to know what was wrong with her, and tried very hard to listen to those people, but her voice became weaker and weaker, and her consciousness sank again. That's too bad. Is she going to die? I can't be reconciled. She hasn't lived enough, and she doesn't know when she will meet such a suitable skin again. And also, when she becomes a ghost, will Gu Liang despise her again? It was night, and the ward was silent. Gu Liang turned off the overhead light, leaving only one light at the entrance for illumination. The indoor light was dim and soft. Tang Tang was lying on the hospital bed, her eyes were tightly closed, and her expression was disturbed. Muzi I whispered to Gu Liang, I'll come see her tomorrow, Don't be too tired. Gu Liang nodded slightly. Well, thank you. The cruise ship docked in Xianghai, and it was Murong Cheng and Mu Ziyi who arranged for Tang Tang the best hospital and the best surgeon. His life was saved, but the severed hand was gnawed incomplete by man-eating ants, so that it could not be connected. Gu Liang gently pushed back the broken hair on her forehead. She seemed to be in a nightmare, her lips opened and closed, but she didn't make a sound, only tears were silently streaming down the corners of her eyes. Gu Liang wiped her tears and called her name softly, Tang Tang, it's okay, it's okay. She yelled Mom in a daze. His heart is about to break. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1555. The next day, when Mu Ziyi came to visit Tang Tang, she had already woken up and was crying on the bed. Gu Liang sat aside, with a cold face and an ugly expression. What's the matter? Mu Ziyi walked in confused. Hearing Mu Ziyi's voice, Tang Tang opened her tear-filled eyes, and cried sadly, Mu Ziyi. My hand is gone. Mu Ziyi. You chopped it yourself, did you forget? Mu Ziyi probably understands Gu Liang's mood at the moment, the love is deep and the responsibility is serious. Even when she saw Tang Tang crying like this, she couldn't help but want to blame her. Even though she knew that being an afterthought was very annoying, she couldn't help it. Look at you, why are you selling yourself if you have nothing to do? If you hadn't gotten on that boat with Huang Logui, you wouldn't have encountered such a thing, and if you hadn't encountered such a thing, you wouldn't have lost your hand. Speaking of this, Mu Ziyi looked at Gu Liang. Is there any news about Huang Logui? Gu Liang shook his head sullenly. He had already run away without a trace. Sitting on the bed, Tang Tang cried even more fiercely. It was because Gu Liang didn't want me that I went to the auction. It was because you didn't allow me to kill people that I kept that cousin's life. Now his hands are gone. You two still blame others. Gu Liang. Mu Ziyi. I'm really scared of her. Okay, don't cry. Mu Ziyi had a headache, and I really don't know how Gu Liang usually endured it. She carried the insulated lunchbox to the table and opened it layer by layer. The old mother generally told Tang Tang, the doctor said that you can't eat spicy food in the near future, and add more high-protein foods. I asked the kitchen to cook everything. Don't be picky eaters, try to be nutritionally balanced. Tang Tang leaned back, half of her body sunk in the big pillow, her tears stopped, but her eyes were still wet. Hands hurt so much, I can't eat, she sobbed. Mu Ziyi's heart went crazy. Isn't your right hand fine? Tang Tang leaned against the pillow with her face sideways, and said sadly, but when I use my right hand, I will think of my left hand, and it will hurt a lot. Gu Liang sighed, walked around from the bed, picked up the bowl, and said, let me feed her. Mu Ziyi has no objection. In fact, it wasn't that she didn't want to be nice to Tang Tang, it was because Tang Tang did too much this time, even though she knew it was to save others, but thinking of her hurting her body, she couldn't help but get angry. What's more, Mu Ziyi believed that, for Gu Liang, he would rather see someone else's child get hurt than see Tang Tang lose his hand. As a human being, there will be selfishness. She cared for her in every possible way, wishing she could hold it in the palm of her hand, but she was so ruthless that if she said to cut it off, she would cut it off. How could Gu Liang not be angry? Tang Tang is actually very good at reading people's faces, and when she sees Gu Liang's sullen face, she hastened to cry and pretend to be pitiful, because then Gu Liang would not have the heart to scold her, and would coax her. She silently praised her wit in her heart. Gu Liang fed Tang Tang soup. Tang Tang was very obedient. While sipping, he secretly observed Gu Liang's face. He seemed really angry, and his expression was extremely cold. How is Murong Cheng handling the matter over there? Gu Liang asked Mu Ziyi. Mu Ziyi pursed her lips, remained silent for a moment, and said, Jean was hiding in a warehouse on the ground floor. When he was found, he was already dead. There were wounds all over his body. The wounds were of different sizes and depths. It is presumed that he was killed by at least 3 people. More than one person, stabbed to death with different knives. She sighed in a low voice, and continued, the people from under the rose have handed over all the corpses to the Stan family. The reason given is that Jean was assassinated by the enemy. As for the Stan brothers, they were harmed innocently. Murong Cheng said that in order to preserve the reputation of Under the Rose, even if it is found out that the matter is related to the waiter on the ship, it will be concealed, otherwise no one will dare to participate in the auction of Under the Rose in the future. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1556. Gu Liang nodded slightly, and said calmly, it's a wise move to deal with it this way. If people get hold of the waiter's matter or evidence, it's not only a matter of reputation, but it will also cause big trouble for the Stan family. Now it's like this, at least the Stan family half the rage was on dead Jean. After feeding a few spoonfuls of soup, he put down the spoon and bowl, and wiped the corners of Tang Tang's mouth. Is it because you are afraid of this that you refuse to name the murderer? Gu Liang asked her. Tang Tang shook her head, no. Mu Zi was curious, then why did you keep holding back? Because the old man forbids me to say it. Tang Tang shrugged helplessly, I promised him, a ghost must keep his word. He said that the captain hid a lot of bombs in the bilge, which would detonate if things were exposed, but, anyway, we are not on the ship now, if we want to explode, we will explode. When Mu Zi heard this, a layer of cold sweat broke out on Mu Zi's back. If she hadn't found the blade in the vase before, if it wasn't because of a lot of scruples, she might have already exposed the matter of the waiter. Fortunately, there is no nonsense. Otherwise, thousands of people on the whole ship will be finished together. Mu Zi hurriedly got up, I'll go find Murong Cheng and ask him to check the identity of the captain. After finishing speaking, without waiting for Gu Liang and Tang Tang's reaction, they left in a hurry. The captain is the highest commander on a ship, in charge of all affairs on the ship, and has absolute authority. As a captain, not only rich sailing experience and driving skills are required, but also high emotional intelligence and high quality are required to be competent for the daily administrative management on board. Such a crucial position, Under the Rose, must be entrusted to a person who absolutely trusts. Could it be that the death of Brother Stan was really planned by Under the Rose? Gu Liang thought for a while and asked Tang Tang, which old man told you? It's that, the old lady who bid 1 billion yuan, her husband. Tang Tang said, didn't he land on the way? Before the couple disembarked, the old man came to tell me. Gu Liang has never met the old lady, let alone any old man, even if Tang Tang told him so, he was still at a loss. After all, this matter is over, and now that she has just gone through a life and death calamity with her, Gu Liang is not in the mood to get to the bottom of it. Intermittently, she fed Tang Tang some other food, probably because she had just woken up and had a bad appetite, so she only ate a little bit of everything. Gu Liang took off the pillow behind her and helped her lie down to rest. She looked at him with bright eyes, filled with attachment. Sleep a little longer. Gu Liang sighed and patted her head. Tang Tang hesitated to speak, and asked him in a low voice, are you leaving? Gu Liang gave a faint I'll go back to the hotel to rest, and I'll see you later. When I'm not around, you have to be good and don't bother the doctors and nurses, you know. I watched her all night last night and didn't sleep, so I am really tired now. Tang Tang pursed her lips, a little aggrieved, thinking about it since she woke up. Gu Liang didn't seem to give her a good face, and her eyes were unconsciously covered with mist. Gu Liang wanted to sigh again. What's wrong? Tang Tang choked with sobs and asked him, don't want me anymore? What are you dreaming about again? Gu Liang was helpless. I just go back to the hotel to rest, and I will come to accompany you in 4 or 5 hours at most. Why do you have to go back to the hotel to rest? Tang Tang burst into tears. It's obvious that you can rest here. She pursed her mouth and sobbed a few times, and her tone became more determined. Last time you said that if I lose the ring again, you don't want me anymore. You really don't want me now. The ring was worn on her left hand, and she didn't even have her hand. Of course the ring is gone. Keep 4 more. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1557. The more Tang Tang thought about it, the more she felt it was so. Gu Liang doesn't want her anymore. Tears accumulated in my eyes, and finally couldn't hold any more, and rushed out. She was so sad that she was dying, but she wanted to try not to cry. She was lying on the hospital bed and weeping silently. How pitiful she looked, how pitiful she looked. When she is well behaved, it is honey, which can make you feel sweet. But once you get emotional, it's a bee, and it's designed to pierce your heart. Gu Liang really couldn't do anything about her, so he asked the nurse to push another bed over and put it against the wall. Okay, don't cry, Gu Liang coaxed her in a low voice, I'll just rest here. She glanced at the bed, sniffed, it's so far away. Gu Liang pushed the bed closer to her. She still couldn't stop crying. Gu Liang's whole brain hurts, and finally the 2 beds were joined together, almost becoming a double bed. She immediately smiled. Habitually wanting him to hug her, she stretched out her arm, and when she saw that the front end was bandaged thickly, she remembered that she was missing a hand, so she hid that arm behind her back embarrassingly. After hesitating for a while, she took out her arm again and acted like a baby to him. Gu Liang, your hand hurts. Gu Liang's tone was cold, even a little cold. If you lose your hands, why would it hurt? Tang Tang changed her tune and said, my arm hurts. Gu Liang looked at her wrapped arm like a rice dumpling. His eyes were deep, and his voice was also deep. Tang Tang, I'm getting old, don't bother me anymore, okay? After struggling a few more times, he really doubted that he would die suddenly. Even if you don't die, you will enter middle age early, right? It feels like a lot has changed recently. Tang Tang's eyes were full of guilt, but his mouth was muttering in a low voice, I didn't know before, that it would be so inconvenient to have less hands. Stop talking. Gu Liang covered his stomach, he felt a pain in his liver. Although she was buried, Tang Tang was still very happy that Gu Liang was willing to stay with her. The 2 slept side by side. Tang Tang had to lie in Gu Liang's arms while she was being given an injection. She felt very at ease and warm when she felt his body temperature and smelled his breath, and soon fell asleep. When she was half asleep and half awake, she felt that Gu Liang was gently touching her hair, caressing the strands of her hair, making her a little itchy. I thought, what's so good about hair? You touch my chest. She twisted her body and subconsciously rubbed her breasts against him so that he could touch him more easily, but after waiting for a long time, she didn't see any movement from him. Tang Tang was about to fall asleep again. After being injured, she was so tired, why does her face seem to be wet? Never mind, so sleepy. The next day, Mu Zi came to the hospital to visit Tang Tang again. Gu Liang went to the attending physician's office, and in the ward, Mu Zi and Tang Tang chatted about the captain. Remember the story about the angel with broken wings they told last time? The captain is that girl's father. Tang Tang suddenly realized, so I really came here to seek revenge. That man is a retired Navy man. After his wife committed suicide, he never gave up looking for his missing daughter. Later, when he learned about the organization Under the Rose, he began to try to get in. Mu Zi sighed and shook his head. It's really hard to imagine that he has been preparing for this revenge plan for a whole 10 years. During these 10 years, at the auction every year, he would meet the Stan brothers, and even pass each other. However, he held back every time, until now, when the time is ripe, he really made a move. Tang Tang heard this, and couldn't help being surprised. Murong Cheng checked too quickly, it only took a day. Because the captain surrendered himself to his boss, the news was bought by Murong Cheng from the ship, so there should be no falsehood. Why surrender? Will his boss send him to the Stan family? I thought so at first, but I didn't expect the big boss to let the past go. Not only didn't punish him, but let him continue to serve as the captain. Mu Zi sighed, I used to be a lonely family, but now I have revenge and have no worries. In the future, I should be dedicated to serving the great. Do your best, boss. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1558. Compared with right and wrong, businessmen care more about how to maximize their own interests. Instead of spending several years to train another captain, it is better to continue to use the old man, knowing the basics, and more at ease. He entered under the rose as an ordinary crew member. While working hard to get promoted, he secretly contacted the parents of the children who were harmed by the Stan brothers. Not everyone has the courage to revenge. Some people are scared when they hear the surname Stan. They had to hide, and some became mentally disturbed because they couldn't stand the blow. In the end, a few people were assembled, and in order to get revenge, they deliberately learned the skills of fighting and using weapons. Later he was promoted to captain and hired those people as waiters, doing some unremarkable jobs on the ship. Although a strict plan was made this time, they also had the determination to die. If any accident happened, the bomb would be detonated, and they would all die together. When Mu Zi thought of those bombs, he felt lingering fear, and then sighed. Fortunately, those bodyguards didn't search carefully, otherwise, if the boat sank, I would die in the water again. I can hardly remember how many times. Tang Tang was not too moved. While listening to Mu Zi's chant, she grabbed the dried strawberries in the packaging bag and ate them. Seeing her heartless appearance, Mu Zi couldn't help frowning. You are recuperating in the hospital, so you shouldn't eat these messy snacks. Gu Liang is too spoiled with you. The doctor only said that spicy food is not allowed, but he didn't say that snacks are not allowed. Tang Tang didn't care. Can't you eat less? If you eat too much, you will get angry and get inflamed easily. I can't. Tang Tang pouted, I have to eat something to divert my attention, otherwise my hands will always hurt. After she finished speaking, she remembered that Gu Liang said that her hand was gone, and changed her words again, I always feel that my arm hurts. Mu Zi curled her lips and asked, when will you be discharged from the hospital? Next week. Speaking of being discharged from the hospital, Tang Tang's brows and eyes were full of smiles. In a few days, I can go home with Gu Liang. Mu Zi felt that what she had told her about women wanting to be independent and self-reliant was all in vain. She sighed and said, forget it, you won't be able to stay here for a few days, I'd better treat you better. Tell me what you want to eat, what to drink, what you need, and I will try my best to satisfy you. Tang Tang and Mu Zi were not polite, and made many requests in one go, from cosmetics, to a change of underwear, to recreational snacks, a lot of bits and pieces. Mu Zi patiently wrote it down. Oh, that's right. Tang Tang thought of another thing, and stretched out his right hand in front of Mu Zi. Mu Zi looked at her inexplicably. Why? Cut someone's nails? Tang Tang said with a smile, I can't cut them with one hand, it's so uncomfortable. Mu Zi. After being silent for a while, he resignedly took out the nail clippers from the drawer and cut Tang Tang's nails. It's hard to describe this feeling. Seeing her cut off her own hand to save someone else's child made me feel really distressed, but seeing her smile indifferently made me very angry. Fortunately, this ancestor is leaving soon, let Gu Liang take care of him in the future. Muzi lowered her head and cut her nails. Tang Tang said again, by the way, there is one more thing. Muzi said angrily, do you want me to cut your toenails for you? No, Tang Tang said, I want someone to fix the ceiling of the ward, it seems to be leaking. Muzi raised her head and looked, there is no leak, if there is a leak, there will be water stains. It's true, I've been sleeping for the past 2 nights, and the water dripped on my face, Tang Tang spoke with certainty. Muzi thought it was impossible, she thought about it, and roughly understood what was going on. Seeing Tang Tang's dumbfounded expression, Muzi wanted to laugh, but the corners of her mouth just grinned, and she suddenly felt sad. The whole heart is constricted into a ball, uncomfortable. From the corner of her eye, she glanced at the arm wrapped in thick gauze. Muzi sighed in disappointment, said nothing, and continued to cut her nails in suspense. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1559. When Gu Liang came back, the 2 people in the ward were arguing. Tang Tang asked Muzi to cut her toenails, but Muzi refused, and Tang Tang scolded Muzi for breaking his promise. Muzi asked bluntly, when did I promise to cut your toenails? Just now, you said it yourself. Tang Tang was confident, if you didn't say it, I wouldn't even remember to cut it. You are utterly unreasonable, Muzi was furious. When she saw Gu Liang came back, she couldn't maintain a polite demeanor, so she put the nail clippers in Gu Liang's hands angrily, you come and serve. After all, he picked up his bag and left. Gu Liang. He looked down at the nail clippers in his hand, and then at Tang Tang's little feet. Tang Tang retracted her feet silently, and mumbled, I didn't force her, she said she would cut it for me, and it doesn't count. Gu Liang came over, sat down on the edge of the bed, reached out and pulled her feet out, and put them on his lap. Tang Tang watched curiously as he cut his toenails. I always feel that this job is a little girly, not suitable for him to do, it feels weird. Gu Liang cut very slowly, as if worried that she would cut her tender flesh. It took a long time to cut off one foot, and then cut the other. When he finished cutting all the cuts, Tang Tang couldn't help asking, will your hands stink? Gu Liang laughed, put down the nail clippers, and stretched out his hands in front of her, have you heard? Tang Tang hurriedly pulled up the sheet to cover her face, and shouted angrily, go and wash your hands. She doesn't want to smell her own feet. Gu Liang flicked her forehead amusedly, you also hate your own feet. But I really have to wash her, and I have to feed her, peel oranges, and twist bottle caps. Ever since this wife got married, she felt like she was raising a child. There are many things that you don't care about when they exist, but after you lose them, you find that everything becomes inconvenient. Tang Tang always thought that losing her hand was no big deal, at most it would make her look a little ugly, anyway, it was a left hand. It is well known that the majority of behavior is dependent on the right hand. But when she found that she couldn't do many small things by herself, she felt uneasy. Put on moisturizer, dig out a little bit, and habitually want to rub it with both hands before applying it, but she can't do it. Thinking that her hair was messy, she took a scrunchie and prepared to tie a braid, but she couldn't do it. Taking a shower at night, unbuttoning her clothes with one hand, and undressing with one hand, she couldn't do it. Even playing with the mobile phone, she finds it very difficult to use only one hand. Gu Liang took care of her in the hospital. For the first 2 days, she was very happy, even proud. But on the 3rd day, the 4th day, Tang Tang really started to panic. Has she become a liability? At night, Gu Liang helped her take off the hospital gown, and carried her to the bathroom to take a bath. He asked her to hold her left arm high so the wound wouldn't get wet, and he lathered her body. She felt a little uncomfortable, and asked in a low voice, "Gu Liang, why don't you hire a nurse?" Gu Liang smiled, and tapped a foam on her nose with her fingertips. A few days ago, who was unwilling to hire a nurse? He also said that he was shy and introverted, and he was afraid when he saw strangers, so he had to be taken care of by someone close to him. Tang Tang muttered, "They don't want you to work too hard. If there is a nurse, you don't have to do these things." Gu Liang lowered his head to help her clean, and said, "Please wait until you get back, find a suitable nurse, and I can rest assured when I go to the company." She gave a muffled hum. After washing for a while, he picked up the shower head and showered the foam on her body. The foam was white and flowed down the water in big balls, revealing a fresh and tender body. Tang Tang couldn't help but asked again, "Gu Liang, why didn't you touch me when you helped me take a bath these days? Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1560. What are you thinking about again? Gu Liang couldn't laugh or cry. "You are all injured and hospitalized, can I mess around?" Tang Tang frowned, and said in a serious tone, "I injured my hand, but it's very good there." Gu Liang didn't know how to explain. Even if it was the hand that was injured, hospitalization would definitely require a good recuperation. This is basic common sense, how could you mess around? But Tang Tang thought further and further, and she wanted to cry, Do you think that I am missing a hand and become ugly? Are you not interested in me anymore? Dislike me?" Seeing her mood rising, Gu Liang immediately accelerated the speed of rinsing, washed her thoroughly, then wrapped her in a bath towel, carried her out, and stuffed her into the quilt. Her skin was rosy after taking a bath just now, and her eyes were also moist, and her black and bright pupils reflected his face, full of frustration and grievance that she was reluctant to speak. Gu Liang put a kiss on her forehead, and coaxed softly, "Be obedient, you are now living in the hospital and need to recuperate. I don't dislike you, and you don't want to think about it, okay?" Tang Tang looked at him fixedly, and asked in a low voice, "You really don't dislike him?" "I really don't dislike it." Gu Liang sighed, lowered his head to kiss her plump and tender red lips, and murmured, "I love you so much." Tang Tang's eyeballs rolled slightly, the corners of his mouth slightly turned up, and he said softly, "If you let me touch it, I will believe you. Do you want to make an inch of it? Don't you believe me?" Gu Liang reached into the quilt and pinched the soft flesh on her waist. Tang Tang smiled and twisted. Fearing that she would hit the bandaged arm, Gu Liang didn't dare to make trouble with her anymore. After kissing her a few times, he got up and went to the bathroom to take a shower. During her hospitalization, she was clingier than usual, and she couldn't leave him for a moment, so he didn't dare to delay too long, and soon after taking a shower, he found Tang Tang had fallen asleep. She closed her eyes and looked so good. Gu Liang smiled, turned off the light, and lay down. After a while, there was a slight rustling sound on the bed, but Gu Liang pretended not to hear it, and lay still. After a while, a limp little hand reached into his bed. Gu Liang. Sure enough, being obedient is just an illusion. The little hand touched around, touched his arm, continued to touch his stomach. Here she paused, seeming to consider whether to touch up or down. After hesitating for a while, Xiao Xiao went down without hesitation. Gu Liang inhaled, and in the nick of time, grabbed her hand. "Don't make trouble, go to bed quickly," he whispered. Tang Tang snorted unhappily, "I also said that I don't dislike him. I used to let them touch me, but now I don't allow it." Gu Liang didn't make a sound, just held that hand and stuffed it back into her bed. But she persevered, and not long after, Her little hand sneaked into his bed again, acting daringly. Gu Liang knew that if he didn't do something tonight, he would definitely not be able to sleep. This place is really inconvenient. I'm worried that the sound insulation is not good, the sound will come out, I'm worried that touching the wound will hurt her, I'm worried that it's too intense for her to bear. Moreover, the hospital bed is too narrow, even if two beds are put together, the middle there is also a thumb-wide slit. Throughout the process, he strives to be gentle. The result may be too gentle, she muttered dissatisfied under him, are you perfunctory me? Gu Liang. Because of her words, the gurgling stream turned into a raging wave, the gentle gentleman showed his beast's claws, the sky turned clouds and the ground rained, and tossed until the middle of the night, and finally felt comfortable, had a good time, and was tired and sleepy. Gu Liang thought, she should be satisfied now, right? There was a faint sobbing in his ears. Why are you crying? He immediately sat up. Tang Tang said sadly, it suddenly occurred to me that without a hand, I won't be able to use many postures in the future, woo woo woo. The plot of Cutting Hands is designed, one is to show that she has knots about the past, and the other is to hope that she will learn to cherish herself. I saw that some readers said they couldn't accept it, but I actually couldn't accept it either. Sometimes when I read news about girls selling their bodies or kidneys in order to buy a mobile phone, I found it very unbelievable. Is a mobile phone more important than your own body? In the final analysis, he is still ignorant and immature. As for Tang Tang, in the past it was too easy for a ghost to get on his body, like a hermit crab. If one shell is broken, you have to replace it with another one, so I lack empathy, and I feel that it doesn't matter if others have fewer hands. Planted, and grown up. By the way, the update will be very late tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow will be updated.